How much does everyday life cost in Beijing, and what does it actually feel like to live in China's capital as a foreigner? To find out, I spent 10 days exploring Beijing's local neighborhoods, incredible food, and historical landmarks dating back thousands of years. Before landing, I was a bit stressed. How do you survive a city where Google Maps, WhatsApp, and Uber are completely blocked? Can you get around without speaking a word of Chinese? And is Beijing actually cheap, or will it drain your bank account like other global megacities? I'm going to show you my exact expenses for accommodation, food, coffee, transportation, and nights out. Plus the small everyday costs like groceries, haircuts, and phone data. But more importantly, you'll see the real Beijing. How to set up your phone so you can actually pay for things, the best hidden local spots, and the frustrating downsides nobody warns you about before visiting China. So, let's get into it. Before we get into prices, food, neighborhoods, or the apps you need before visiting China, I want to start with my first impressions of Beijing. Because honestly, before arriving, I wasn't really sure what to expect. At first, Beijing felt intimidating. It's enormous, completely different from most places I've visited, and it has its own systems that take some time to understand. But after spending days exploring the city, riding the metro, working from cafes, and walking through different neighborhoods, I realized Beijing was much easier to navigate than I expected. The first thing that surprised me was simply the scale. The roads are huge, neighborhoods stretch for miles, and even the metro stations can feel like small cities. But somehow, I got used to it pretty quickly, and after a couple of days, I felt comfortable moving around on my own. I also noticed how quiet the city felt. For a place with more than 20 million people, there was much less noise than I expected, partly because so many vehicles are electric now. What I loved most about Beijing was the contrast between old and new. One moment you're walking through a quiet hutong with traditional courtyard homes, and the next you're surrounded by skyscrapers, shopping malls, and modern technology. And it's not only about history and architecture, Beijing also has a creative side. Hidden art spaces, small galleries, cafes, and unique neighborhoods often feel like little cities inside the city, each with its own atmosphere. Despite its size, Beijing is surprisingly green and relaxed. Parks, lakes, and tree-lined streets give you plenty of places to slow down, while daily life feels very convenient thanks to the city's digital systems. And then there's the history. Of course, you have the Great Wall of China, the Lama Temple, the Temple of Heaven, and Tiananmen Square. But I also loved simply walking around the older parts of the city. Sometimes my favorite moments were just sitting in a quiet square, watching locals walk by, and taking in the atmosphere. Throughout my trip, I also felt safe exploring different areas. The language barrier can be challenging, but translation apps help a lot, and people were usually willing to help whenever I needed it. And I think that's what surprised me most about Beijing. I arrived expecting a city that would feel overwhelming and difficult to understand. Instead, after a few days, everything started to make sense. One thing I realized pretty quickly about Beijing is just how huge the city is, so choosing where to stay can feel overwhelming. For me, the most important thing wasn't finding the perfect neighborhood, but simply staying somewhere close to a metro station. With a city this large, that makes a huge difference. For my 10 days here, I stayed in Panjiyuan in southeast Beijing. It's not usually the first area tourists choose, but honestly, it worked really well for me. I was just a short walk from the metro, which made it easy to reach places like the Forbidden City, the Temple of Heaven, and other parts of the city. What I liked most was how local the area felt. There were small restaurants, supermarkets, and fruit shops, convenience stores, and cafes nearby, so I could easily settle into a normal daily routine. I was also within walking distance of the famous Panjiyuan Antique Market, which has its own interesting history as Beijing's old ghost market, when traders used to sell goods before dawn. My room was simple but comfortable, with a private bathroom, air conditioning, daily housekeeping, and friendly staff. I paid 118 yuan per night, around $15, and considering the location and convenience, I thought it was excellent value. If it's your first time in Beijing, areas like Dongcheng and Chaoyang can be more convenient for reaching the main sites and exploring the city. But personally, I wouldn't pay a huge premium just to stay in the most touristy areas. As long as you're close to a metro station, you have plenty of options. One of my favorite things about Beijing is the food. What surprised me is that you can eat very well here without spending much, while still having plenty of international options when you want something different. For breakfast, small restaurants and street vendors serve things like buns, pancakes, dumplings, and soy milk for around 10 to 20 yuan. For lunch or dinner, local restaurants are also very affordable. A bowl of noodles, fried rice, or a simple meat and vegetable dish usually costs around 20 to 35, and it's often enough for a full meal. Of course, Beijing is also a great place to try northern Chinese specialties. Peking duck is the most famous, but you'll also find dishes like dumplings, lamb skewers, and plenty of other local favorites. Supermarkets and convenience stores like 7-Eleven and Family Mart are clean, modern, and easy to use. Everyday items like fruit, snacks, and drinks are generally affordable, while imported products can be noticeably more expensive. And if you miss familiar food, Beijing has no shortage of international restaurants, bakeries, cafes, and brunch spots. Personally, I mixed both. Most of my meals were local, but I still enjoyed good coffee and the occasional Western meal. In total, I spent around 80 yuan per day on food, which felt like a comfortable balance without trying to save money. Getting around Beijing was one of the things that surprised me most. Looking at the size of the city, you expect transportation to be complicated, but the system here makes moving around much easier than you might imagine. The metro is the backbone of the system. Beijing has one of the largest subway networks in the world, connecting almost every part of the city. The trains are clean, affordable, and easy to use with signs in both Chinese and English. Most rides cost around 3 to 7 yuan, and even crossing the city usually costs less than $1. Some stations are enormous, so walking between platforms or exits can take a few minutes. But once I understood the system, the metro became my main way of getting around. For areas outside the metro network, buses are another affordable option, although I personally didn't use them much. For more comfortable rides, there's Didi, China's version of Uber. Since it's integrated into Alipay, ordering a car is very simple. Short rides usually cost around 15 to 40, and even longer trips are still quite reasonable. Then there are the shared bicycles, which you'll see everywhere around metro stations, parks, and residential areas. You can unlock them with Alipay and leave them when you're done. I especially enjoyed cycling through the hutongs and older neighborhoods, where you can slow down and discover small streets that you might easily miss by car or metro. And some areas, especially around the Forbidden City, are simply better explored on foot. What makes everything even smoother is that so much of the transport system works through your phone. Metro rides, taxis, bike rentals, and payments can all be handled digitally, so you rarely need cash or physical tickets. If you work remotely, Beijing is a surprisingly comfortable city. It's not your typical digital nomad destination, but the coffee culture here has exploded. You'll find everything from tiny cafes hidden in traditional hutongs to modern specialty shops packed with people on laptops. An Americano here is around 15 to 20 yuan, while milk-based drinks run about 20 to 30. For a premium experience, independent specialty cafes cost more, around 30 to 45. But the atmosphere is perfect for working. Once your eSIM and VPN are set up, working from cafes here feels completely normal and easy. What I loved most about Beijing's lifestyle is that you don't always need a rigid plan. Some of the best days come from simply walking around and exploring whatever neighborhood catches your attention. The historical hutongs are easily my favorite part of the city. They give you a glimpse of an older side of Beijing where locals still live, socialize, and go about their daily lives. History here isn't just trapped in museums. At famous landmarks, you'll see locals using these ancient parks every day to exercise, relax, and meet friends. The nightlife is also incredibly diverse. While it's not as internationally famous as Shanghai, areas like Sanlitun offer modern bars, while the Lake Districts feature smaller pubs with local Chinese bands playing live music. Prices vary, but a beer in a casual bar is usually 30 to 50 yuan, while upscale cocktails can jump over 100. That variety is exactly what makes Beijing special. You can spend your morning answering emails in a futuristic cafe, your afternoon exploring a 600-year-old palace, and your evening listening to live music in a hidden local bar. Healthcare in Beijing actually surprised me in a good way. There are modern private hospitals and international clinics with good equipment, short waiting times, and often English-speaking staff, so getting medical care as a foreigner is relatively easy. Routine things like checkups or minor issues can be quite affordable, but emergencies or hospital stays can get expensive quickly. That's why when I'm abroad for longer periods, I personally prefer having international health insurance. I use Safety Wing, which has two main options. Nomad Essential focuses on travel and emergency medical coverage across 180 plus countries, making it a good fit if you're moving between countries or staying abroad short to midterm. I pay around $62 every 4 weeks, although the price depends on your age and plan. For longer-term living, Nomad Complete also includes routine and emergency medical care, screenings, and more comprehensive global health coverage. If you want to check it out, click the link in the description or scan this QR code. It supports the channel at no extra cost to you. Use the promo code NOMADNEST by finding the pink camera on the homepage to get 2 months of the electronics theft add-on free with your first Nomad Essential purchase. Now, let's talk about the actual numbers. What you're seeing on screen is everything I spent during my 10 days in Beijing. I tracked all my expenses, including accommodation, food, transportation, coffee, insurance, and the small daily costs that are easy to forget. Of course, Beijing can be done much cheaper if you stay in cheaper accommodation, eat mostly local food, and avoid paid attractions. But you can also spend much more if you choose nicer hotels, international restaurants, and more expensive entertainment. For my trip, I tried to keep it realistic. I wasn't traveling on the cheapest possible budget, but I also wasn't trying to spend like a tourist on vacation every day. In total, I spent around 3,800 yuan over 10 days, which is roughly $500 US. For me, this felt like a very comfortable budget for experiencing Beijing without constantly worrying about every expense. What surprised me most is that a city like Beijing can still be very affordable. Even with world-famous attractions, an incredible transportation system, and endless things to do, you don't need to spend a huge amount of money to enjoy it. If you've been to Beijing and had a different experience with prices, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. China is probably the most digital country I've ever visited, but it also works very differently from what most of us are used to. Many everyday apps like YouTube, Gmail, Instagram, and WhatsApp are blocked or restricted. The first thing I recommend is getting an eSIM before your flight. Make sure it's activated before landing, because setting everything up after connecting to Chinese networks can be much more complicated. Most travel eSIMs route through places like Hong Kong or Singapore, which means your phone can usually access services like Google, YouTube, and Gmail, just like back home. If you're bringing a laptop, I'd also recommend installing a VPN before arriving. Once your internet is ready, the most important app is Alipay. Download it before your trip, connect your Visa or MasterCard, complete the verification, and you'll be ready for everyday life in China. I used Alipay for almost everything. Restaurants, coffee shops, supermarkets, metro rides, taxis, and shared bikes. China is basically a cashless society, and even small local shops usually prefer QR code payments. For transportation, Didi is China's version of Uber, and Hello Bike is great for short rides. The best part is that both are already integrated into Alipay, so you don't need many separate apps. For navigation, I found Amap much more useful than Google Maps. It has better local information, public transport routes, restaurant listings, and walking directions. After a few days, it became my main way of exploring Beijing. Another useful app is Trip.com. It's great for booking hotels and especially for buying high-speed train tickets as a foreigner. The last one is WeChat. Unfortunately, I never fully managed to set it up because the verification process can sometimes be complicated. At first, I didn't think it mattered, but later I realized how important it is in China for staying connected with people. I actually ended up exchanging email addresses with a few locals I met, which felt very old school, but somehow it worked. Those were the main apps I used during my trip. If you've been to China and know another useful app, share it in the comments because it will definitely help future travelers. Before booking your flight to China, the first thing you should check is your visa requirements. The rules depend on your passport, so there is no single answer for everyone. Many travelers still need to apply for a tourist visa before arriving, usually through a Chinese embassy or visa application center. The process is generally straightforward. You'll typically need your passport, application form, photo, travel details, and proof of accommodation. There are also visa-free transit options and short-term visa exemptions for some nationalities, but these depend on your specific situation and can change over time. So the simple rule is, don't assume you can just arrive and enter China. Check the latest requirements for your passport before booking your trip and prepare everything in advance. Once your visa situation is sorted, the rest of planning your China adventure becomes much easier. Of course, Beijing isn't perfect. Like any major city, it has its own challenges, and I think it's important to talk about them honestly. The first thing you notice is the size. Beijing is enormous, and the distances between neighborhoods can be much bigger than you expect. Even with an excellent metro system, crossing the city can easily take 40 minutes or more, so you need to plan your days around where you want to go. The language barrier is another adjustment. Outside of tourist areas, daily life is mostly in Chinese, and things like menus, signs, and local communication can feel challenging at first. But with translation apps and the right setup, most situations become much easier. The weather is also something to consider. Summers are hot and humid, winters are cold and dry, and the seasonal changes are much stronger than in many parts of Asia. Another thing is that daily life in China simply works differently. The payment systems, apps, and everyday routines are not always what foreigners are used to. The first few days can feel like a learning process, but once you understand the system, many things actually become very convenient. Beijing can also feel less international compared to cities like Shanghai. Many areas still feel very local and traditional, which some people will love, while others might need more time to adjust. But personally, I think that's exactly what makes Beijing interesting. It's not a city that feels familiar immediately, but once you start understanding how it works, it becomes much more rewarding. I really enjoyed my time here, and I think Beijing is one of those places where the longer you stay, the more you discover.